Hey everybody, welcome back. In this video I want to take some time just to walk through using STEPbible, which is a great study tool for a whole range of purposes when doing some exegesis and biblical studies. So first of all, I just wanted to introduce you to the website and show you around first, and then we'll do a few little sample studies over the next few minutes just to give you an idea of what I do at times whenever I'm doing some biblical studies and need to look some things up. And so this page here is the home page. If you just type in www.stepbible.org, it's going to bring you to this page, and there's going to be two windows pulled up as the default. Of course, Genesis 1 in the English Standard Version is going to be the Bible that appears in the window to the left, and then the right side is some tutorials just showing you how to use the menu bar that's here on the left, and showing you the ways to access the various translations and to do some studies. So I'll leave that to you to do on your own. And so I'm just going to delete that page. I close that box. And that leaves us with the Genesis 1 here in the ESV. And now you may already notice that just by moving my mouse, one of the things that this page will do is words that are in blue are words that have a Hebrew equivalent. Since we're in the Old Testament, and so just by scrolling over that word, it'll highlight a quick lexicon. This is the dictionary. I think it's the Old Testament dictionary comes from Kittle, I believe, or actually, I'm sorry, I think it's Brown, Driver, and Briggs, BDB. So kind of a classic Hebrew dictionary there. So a nice tool. The other thing that'll happen is whenever you scroll over a word, it's going to show where that word appears, the Hebrew word, not necessarily the English word, or the Greek if you're in the New Testament. And this is a nice little feature because if you're looking for keywords in a passage, showing the frequency of usage in the passage that you're studying, this is a quick way to see them because they'll pull up. Let's see here, face is one that sometimes it's translated face or surface. Okay, so just a couple quick things. Now, just getting around a little bit. Let me start with the settings button, this little gear here. Gives you, when it's just as it is here, it's going to show you everything that's check marked will show up. And let me scroll down here. You can get vocab in English as well as the vocabulary in Greek or Hebrew, as well as vocab transliterated. Now this is going to make the page look a little different whenever we do that. What it does is it puts a transliteration. In other words, it's a way to pronounce the Hebrew or the Greek word with English letters. So beginning in the Hebrew is Reshit, and so if you wanted to read it using transliteration, you could do that. You would just want to keep in mind that word order is not the same, so you're not actually reading the Hebrew Bible necessarily as it appears. It's just attaching the word below the English translation, which is fine. It's a quick way to access the vocabulary. As well as, you may know these words by sound and not realize that that's the word being used in your text that you're studying. And so It does help you sometimes to realize what you're reading, and the word for God is a good example. There are many names for God, and sometimes the various names just get translated as God. And so by having this transliteration right there, it lets you see which one it is. Of course, this is Elohim. Okay, so I'm going to remove that. Okay, the quick lexicon, that's the vocab window that shows up at the bottom or the top of the page when you scroll over a word. So when I scroll over light, then down at the bottom there, or is light in Hebrew, and it means just what you would think it means. Okay, so we want the verse vocabulary. We want these things showing up for study. So we're going to leave most of these clicked. Now you may have trouble seeing the text at that size, or you don't care to necessarily see the whole chapter at once. So just for ease of reading, you may want to increase or decrease your font size. And this is a nice feature. So again, all of these options are here in this gear. The notes and references, if the translation that you're using has notes and references and you want to see those, you can click on that, or it comes default clicked. So the ESV, that would be these. This will be a note. Okay, cross references, things like that. Now sometimes you actually don't want those. Like if you're going to be, if you're just coming to this website to cut and paste or to copy the biblical text, and you're going to move it over into a word processor or something, you may not want all those notes getting pasted into your word processor, so you could remove those. And that's going to make your cutting and pasting a whole lot simpler if you're doing some outlining, things like that. All right, so I saw somewhere here, we also want these statistics. So for example, whenever you move your mouse on top of the verse number, what that's going to do, this is a very nice feature that the STEPbible producers have done here. By the way, STEPbible is produced by Tyndall House over in Cambridge, England. But whenever you scroll over the verse number, it's going to give you all of the words, the vocabulary for that verse. And then as we see here, amar, which is a verb, to say, very common verb. It appears 606 times just in the book of Genesis, and over 5,300 times in the entire Old Testament. All right, so you get some quick statistics, but also that's a way to, again, pull up the vocabulary. All right, so these statistics are helpful. They let you see keywords, their usage, their frequency or rarity. Again, so light, for example, appears 6 times in the book of Genesis, 121 times in the entire Hebrew Old Testament. Now, when you click on a word, instead of just, if you want more information, rather than just scrolling over a word, when you click on it, it's going to pull it up in a new window on the right. So, choshek is the word for darkness, and some very useful information. It's always going to give you this information. It's going to tell you how many times that word appears in the Old or New Testament. So Hoshek appears 77 times. And let me hit light. Okay, 110 times. Let's actually do one that's not so frequent. Okay, void, vohu. The earth was tohu vavohu, is how it goes in the Hebrew. It's kind of a rhyme. It's kind of like topsy-turvy. There's a lot of dispute as to what those words actually mean. Okay, so the quick meaning here in the dictionary is emptiness or void or waste. But since this is a hyperlink, if you click on the number of times it's used, again, another nice feature is it will pull up all of the references where that word in the Hebrew appears in the Old Testament. And so we see those 3 places. Okay. Now you can actually set this up to where when you do these things, they'll appear in their own panel. So we can actually add a panel. This word analysis here, it's giving you that word information like when you scroll over a verse number. So if we just have an entire chapter picked up, let's go back to Genesis 1:1 here. Okay, let's see if it does it. Okay, so I hit the analysis button, and now what that does is it shows us all of the words in Genesis chapter 1 and gives you in order of the words that appear most often down to the least used words in the chapter. All right, so in Genesis 1 we see that God, Elohim, appears 32 times. The second most frequent word is eretz, which is the word for land or earth. Kol, all, Amar, to say, Yom, 11 times. May or Mime for water. Okay, Shemaim. Okay, that's your frequency. Again, it's kind of a quick search, and that came from this analysis bar at the very top of the page. That gives you chapter analysis. So, just reviewing again, just using STEPbible here when you're studying a passage. It's a quick reference for a vocabulary to give you a range of meaning for a particular word if you're not sure. Context is your best guide for meaning, but then as we saw with the word vohu, we can look at that word as it's used throughout the Bible to get a better sense of what the word means in its various contexts. So, of course, you would study each of these verses a little bit more in depth. And now another point to make here is when you're doing these word studies, sometimes just the single verse isn't enough. Well, they actually help us with that. Here we have this line. Again, I've gone to the gear. And right now it has 0 verses on either side of the verse we're looking at. Well, I can increase that number. Let's say I want to look at 1 verse on either side. Well, what that does now is, since the word we were studying appeared in Genesis 1:2, now in my search results I get Genesis 1 through 3. And likewise Isaiah 34:10, 11, and 12, Jeremiah 4, 22, 23, and 24. All right, so again, that was you go into the gearbox and you can increase or decrease how many verses you want to see on either side of a word that you're looking up. All right. So again, very handy. So when we think about, the hermeneutical circle and all of the different lenses through which we're looking through when we're studying a passage, we're going to go to a search tool like STEPbible, doing word studies, so doing grammar analysis. We're also going to be able to look at interbiblical connections, how a word or a phrase appears across Scripture. And it also helps us with doing literary analysis, things like keywords, repetition, things like that. This tool can help us very quickly. All right, so another thing, speaking of looking up words and phrases, now up to this point we've just looked at an English translation. let's say let's go to a different passage. Let's go to the New Testament. Say you're studying John and you're in John chapter 1. And you get to we'll do a search, and you realize, that the idea in John is that believing is a key word. It's the key idea. John has written his gospel so that all might believe. And you realize here in verse 6 that it appears that all might believe through him. So John came as a witness to bear witness about the light, that all might believe through him. Well, through your study that that's a key phrase. And so you ask yourself, well, how often does that phrase appear in the whole book? Well, so you can do a phrase search. Of course, you can cut and paste. If you're doing a phrase search, so I hit the magnifying glass, and that says enter search word. The range is from Genesis to Revelation, and it says display the result in the current panel. Actually, we want to get the results in a new panel so that our John 1 text doesn't go away. Your default is to search the whole Bible, but let's say we just want to search within the book of John. So we click John, and we're going to update our search range. So we're searching within John, and now there's different types of searches. You can search just the word or a phrase. And if you notice here, if you're searching a phrase, whatever phrase you're searching for needs to be inside quotation marks. And that's what we're searching. That all might believe. I'll close my quotes. All right, and just before we hit enter, you can search a subject or a person. A fuzzy search is when you don't necessarily have the words in the exact order. It's a phrase that's in your mind, but you can't think of the phrase exactly. And so you're going to do a fuzzy search and hope that STEPbible's database can get you to the verse or verses that you're thinking of. Of course, you can do your search in the original languages. Your keyboard would need to be able to type in Greek or Hebrew, or you just pull up a Greek or Hebrew translation, which STEPbible can do, and you would highlight, copy, and paste up into the search bar. All of your searches go into the search bar here, and then as you see, it'll pull it up in the right category. Of course, you can look up the Hebrew words or the Hebrew word or Greek word in its transliterated form. So if you don't know how to write Greek, but you know what it sounds like, you could type it in like AGAPE for agape. All right, so we're searching that all might believe within the book of John. I've typed it in. I've put it in quotes. It has it in blue. We know it's in John 1, so... Okay, so we get the result. All right, so that exact phrase only appears one time in the book in the ESV. Okay, note that this is an ESV search and not necessarily searching the Greek, the original. Okay, and again, that's a pretty specific phrase. The longer the phrase, the more specific it's going to be. All right, let's do a different search. Another common phrase in John, the hour is coming. Jesus repeatedly uses that phrase. All right, we see it here. The phrase, the hour is coming, appears in John's Gospel. We get 5 results, okay, 5 times. So again, you can look and compare each of these. That's what you would be doing. What is Jesus saying and referring to when he talks about the hour that's coming? And we note that 4:23, the hour is coming, and it's now here. And again, he says in 16, the hour is coming. And verse 25, the hour is coming. In 16:32, the hour is coming. Indeed, it has come, when you will be scattered, each to his own home. All right, so you can search words as well as phrases. And very handy, very useful tool. Okay, one thing we haven't mentioned yet is the grammar search capabilities that are available for us here. And so, let me do that again. So I clicked the word shines in. Let me do that again for you. Okay, John chapter 1, verse 5. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. All right, so I want to just do a little research on the verb here, shines. Is it a verb? Looks like a verb. So I clicked on it, and we get this word analysis that appears. It'll give you the Greek and a transliteration. Phino means to shine or appear. The number here is a Strong's number from the old accordance or concordance system. So that's your Strong's number. Thankfully, we don't have to go through that whole process like the old days using Strong's. All right, and now this little information, now we're getting into grammatical data. When phino is in the active voice, it means to shine or to give light. Greek has a middle voice as well as the passive, and there it means to appear or to be visible. Okay, an active voice means the subject is doing the action. Passive means the subject is receiving the action of the verb. And the middle voice, which English does not have, middle voice would be something like the subject is involved with or involved in the action of the verb. Something like walking. Okay, the person walking is obviously performing the action, but also they're being walked at the same time. So walking often appears as a middle verb. All right, so you do get that information, and one thing that's missing is it is not telling us whether this verb in John 1:5, phino, is an active or a middle passive form. So the question then becomes, how do we get that information? Okay, we still get the usage, and I'll show you that in just a second, how we get that information. All right, again, the dictionary appears. This is LSJ's dictionary, Little, Scott, and Jones. Another classic, this is a classical Greek dictionary. One thing about Little, Scott, and Jones is it's going back to prior to the New Testament era. It's not all Koine Greek. They'll give you some historical information about where the word appeared in classical Greek as well and what it meant then. You do want to make sure that you're not defining a word. The fancy term here is anachronistically. You don't want to translate the word out of time. We want to know what it meant primarily in the Koine Greek period when the New Testament was written. And so this top section is going to be good for that. You're going to see other passages where the word appears and the best definitions in the context of those verses. All right, but this information is interesting, and it can be helpful to see how the meaning of the word possibly developed over time. Words do change. Language changes over time. All right, so this word, obviously they've got a lot of information. For phino, very common word, would have appeared in a lot of ancient writings. Light is obviously a metaphor, so it's going to have very frequent usage. It appears 32 times in the New Testament. All right, so I mentioned that we don't actually have all the information about this word that we could have. And the reason is because we need a Greek translation or a Greek copy of the text. And STEPbible has that. And so we want to go get it. All right, so the way we would do that, as well as pulling up other English translations or several other languages too if you wanted them, is by clicking on your translation. So I did that here. Pulls up a new box. And again, if you notice at the top, you have three categories, all languages. This website was developed for the global church. So there are dozens of different languages that the Bible's translated into that are stored here in STEPbible. And then the ancient translations are your Hebrew and Greek. Of course, those would be your original languages. There is some Aramaic in the Old Testament, but it's basically going to show up in the Hebrew Bible. Coptic is in ancient Greek. Latin, of course, Jerome translated the scriptures into Latin. In the year 405, he finished it, and that became the Bible for the Roman Catholic Church for almost 1,600 years now. Okay, so that would be a very old translation of the Bibles. And of course, even our English translations, the early ones like the King James, leaned heavily on the Vulgate. Syriac is similar to the Aramaic and would have been used in that Syrian region. The Samaritan Pentateuch. Okay, the Samaritans were they weren't necessarily a rival people in Jesus' day. They had a rival religion. Okay, they believed in the books of Moses, but put a different spin on it and made Mount Gerizim their holy mountain, and believed that they were the chosen race. Okay, so they have the first 5 books of the Old Testament. They have their own copies. So that would be a Hebrew, and again, that would probably only be useful to you if you were reading Hebrew. All right. Another very useful tool, if you're pulling up the LXX, that's the Septuagint. That is the oldest Greek translations of the Hebrew Bible, or it's the early Greek translations of the Old Testament. All right, so you can actually look that up as well if you're looking up Old Testament passages. All right, so what we would do here, I'm in the New Testament. So I need a Greek translation. Notice here they have Greek Old Testament as the category. The one I would suggest would be the LXX. Okay, Greek New Testament. Here, notice the SBLG. This is the one I use because it's tagged with a lot of grammatical information. And this is the one produced by Tyndale House, which produces STEPbible. So if I click that and leave the ESV open, and again, there's several English translations. You may like New American Standard, King James, Net Bible, several possibilities. I'll just note here too, if you want to look at an English version of the Latin Vulgate, the Douay-Rheims would be the one to look at there. It's the 1752 edition, so a very, very literal translation of the Latin Vulgate. Okay, so now I've selected the ESV and the the Greek. Click OK. And as you can see, we've got the versification on each line with the English and then the Greek right below it. And we were looking at the word phino, which means to shine. And if you notice, when I scroll the mouse over the English word, the Greek equivalent highlights as well. So you don't need to be able to read Greek to know that verb. And now what I would suggest, what you have to do to pull up that additional information for the word that you're studying, this case, shines, you scroll over it in the English, but then you go down to its Greek equivalent, excuse me, click on that word, and now if you notice, we get new information to appear. All right, this is called parsing, and it tells us that this is a verb being used this time, and it's a present active indicative third person singular. Okay, it's a present tense, it's in the active voice, and it's in the indicative mood. Okay, Greek has tense, voice, and mood, and it has person and number. Okay, we know it's a third person. You can have first person, which would be like I. Second person would be you. Third person would be they. And of course, it's not a they, it's an inanimate object, or it's actually referring to Jesus here, the light. But third person, since it's being spoken by the narrator, talking about the light. So, and then it's a singular form. Okay, it could also be plural. All right, so we actually, when we're doing grammatical analysis, we can pull up the word in its Greek or Hebrew and get that information. And since it's in its present tense, then we would go down here and interpret it based upon a good active voice definition. All right. Just another quick example. There was a man sent from God. So if you're doing some grammatical analysis, is this a passive voice or active or middle? Don't know. So we're going to look it up. So we go to the Greek equivalent, apostomenos, and we get some interesting information here. In the English, it looks like a verb, but in the Greek, it's actually, now they say verb here, but it's actually a perfect passive participle, nominative singular masculine. Okay, a lot of information there, and that's okay, but actually in the Greek, it's a participle, and a participle is a verbal adjective. Okay, it's a verbal adjective. Okay, it has verbal properties as well as noun properties or adjective properties, and it is passive. Okay, perfect passive participle, nominative case, singular masculine. Okay, the fact that this participle is nominative tells us it's referring to a noun or a pronoun in the nominative case, which actually, going back to the text, man here, anthropos, is in the nominative case, and so it makes sense that the reference here, the participle, the man being sent from God, and that's how it might sound in a more literal sense using a participle. Usually participles end in ing in English, so we would say there was a man having been sent from God whose name was John. Okay, so clearly it refers back to this anthropos. Okay, so to get that additional information over here, you have to pull up the Greek, and that'll give you that grammar information. Okay, it may or may not be quite so helpful to you if you don't know much about the original languages or don't care to do a whole lot of grammatical analysis, but I promise there are some hidden treasures when you do grammar studies. You just never know what you're going to find. For example, and I'll end on this one. Let's leave the ESV and the and the Greek pulled up, and let's go to another passage. 1 Peter chapter 1. And in verse 16, going back to 15, Peter is encouraging his readers to not be conformed to the passions of their former ignorance, but as he who called you is holy, you also be holy in all your conduct. Since it is written, you shall be holy, for I am holy. All right. So one thing that's interesting here, when you're looking at the grammar very carefully, is when Peter is telling his readers, and us who come along later, as he, the Lord, who called you is holy, you also be holy in all your conduct. Now, we don't necessarily talk like this. This sounds very biblical in its language. You also be holy. And one of the reasons it doesn't come across so cleanly is when we do just a little bit of analysis on the verb here, to be. When we look it up in the Greek, it's genethete. We get some kind of surprising information. This is an aorist passive imperative, second person plural. Okay, so the you here is plural, so the verb must also be plural. But what's very interesting to me is not only that it's an imperative or a command, but it's passive, which is very interesting. Okay, that means that the subject is not doing the action. The subject is receiving the action. So you are commanded to become holy in all of your conduct. Okay, passive means the subject receives the action of the verb. And the verb here is to become holy. Okay. So what Peter is saying is you must become or be made holy. In other words, you don't make yourself holy. You have to submit to it. Okay, it's an imperative, but in the passive. So who makes us holy? That's the question. If we don't make ourselves holy, who makes us holy? Well, of course, the answer is God does. Okay, He purifies us through the work of Christ and the indwelling Spirit according to the Father's will. So holiness is a work of God. And in fact, that's what He says in the very beginning. All right. They're saints, or they're elect exiles of the dispersion according to the foreknowledge of God the Father in the sanctification of the Spirit. And sanctification is making holy, hagiosmo, to make holy. All right, so that's very interesting grammatical information that's sometimes doesn't carry across a translation very well, but when you're doing some in-depth study, you're reading slowly, digging in deep, you find some very interesting hidden nuggets there. Okay, being holy is a passive imperative. All right, well, hopefully those things get you started. Of course, you may need to look back through this video again and, of course, play around with the website. Most of your settings, again, are in the gearbox. Your search engines, you find your passages by clicking on the text, and the whole Bible will pull up for your search. Okay, you have a whole range of translations, modern and ancient. And to get the grammatical information, you want to pull up your ancient. And again, the Old Testament Hebrew that I pull up is the OHB. It's the Leningrad Codex. It's the Masoretic text. That's the oldest complete copy of the Hebrew Bible in existence. It's housed in Leningrad, or at least it used to be, and it's about 1,000 years old. All right, so you can pull up the OHB as your parallel for Old Testament passages, SBLG for your Greek, parallel for your New Testament passage. And of course, pick your favorite English translation. And by the way, you can pull up multiple English translations. And the advantage to doing that is sometimes when you see very different readings, then that clues you in that the original word in Greek or Hebrew is not easily translated, which might clue you in to go do a little bit more research. All right, so you might say, well, are exiles and aliens the same thing? Things like that. You don't understand dispersion. Well, the New American says scattered throughout. All right, so you can pull up multiple English translations as well as your original languages. Okay, I hope this helps. Enjoy using STEPbible.